Hi, Tim Clemmer here, and we're going to be talking about what is open banking today. The backstory, how we got here. We'll talk about screen scraping. We'll talk about market opportunities, what banks are doing with open banking, and where the industry is headed. So sit back, relax, and let's get going. So the topics for today's podcast we'll start with the backstory of how we got here and why we're talking about open banking and open finance. We'll then define it and how it's addressing some of the concerns that have come up over the last several years. And then where are the market opportunities, how to think about open banking and open finance. And then lastly, as a teaser, we'll just show you what some of the bigger banks are doing with it and how they're evolving with APIs and open banking. So let's go. Let's get started. So why are we talking about open banking, open finance? First and foremost, today's world, the financial technology companies known as fintechs are providing end users with products and services really second to none. Really outstanding, powerful, personalized customer experiences. Think of mobile deposits. And today it was unthought of 10 years ago, where I can now just take a couple of pictures on my phone inside my mobile app, and I do a direct deposit, and I have access to the funds immediately. That's huge. Two, 360-degree view. If you think about it, most people, certainly most businesses, don't have all of their accounts with a single institution. Check-in savings certainly with the same institution. Then they'll have use a different institution potentially for credit cards or loans, commercial loans, mortgages, what have you. And then certainly a different financial institution for 401ks, pensions, what have you. When I bring all that information into one spot, I can now get what they call a 360-degree view of my finances and see where all my assets are, where all my liabilities are, my net, etc. That's the kind of stuff or opportunities and experiences the financial technologies are providing their customer base. Now, to accomplish this, to conjure up this magic, the fintechs sign you up, and one of the first things they're going to do is say, "Hey, Tim, thank you for for signing up and logging into our service. Let's connect you to one of your banks. Enter your user ID and password to your bank. Here, tell us which banks you have, and now enter your user ID and password for each bank." Um, I give it to them. I trust them. They'll store it securely, we hope. And listen, for the most part, the fintechs are doing all the right things from a security point of view. And we're not pointing fingers here at all. But what they do is they collect your user ID and password. Then in the background, they will go and log into the bank, pass the bank your user ID and password, just as if you were logging in yourself. The bank will then offer up the web pages that you would normally see. So now the fintech has access to all of the same web pages that you have access to. And they will take these web pages, they download them, and then they extract the data out of the web page itself. This is called screen scraping. It's the extraction of data out of web pages or out of PDFs and taking that data, running some cleaning on it or scrubbing on it, and putting it in a database and presenting it to you. All well and good, but we now have problems with this. One, you have the security issue. You're giving somebody else your credentials. Not great. Two, you are, excuse me, I I actually gave mymoney.com my credentials to Big Bank, thinking that they were going to get my checking and savings account. But instead, they went and got all my kids' accounts. And guess what? They started downloading the PDF statements I had. And, now all of a sudden there's some privacy concerns. And I really didn't want them to take everything. And I can hide it on their side, but I can't stop them from taking the data. There are also changes. So there are also issues when a bank changes a website, which they do all the time. If they make changes to their web pages, this potentially breaks the screen scraping program. And all of a sudden it's getting the wrong data or putting the right data in the wrong place because column shifted. And now you're being presented bad data, missing data. Well, you usually what happens is the call doesn't go to the fintech, the call goes to the bank, and the bank gets frustrated, and it's costing them and their customer services a lot of money. So there's a lot of frustration in this field due to things like screen scraping. So open banking, let's talk about this, how it got started. Several years ago, the Europeans, as they want to do and lead the world in this, got concerned and created GDPR. And GDPR was primarily about data privacy and the user, the right to be forgotten on the internet, etc. And, an example of GDPR is I'm sure you've seen this now as you're logging into websites, a little banner will come up across the top, the bottom, the side saying, hey, we do have cookies and we do track you. Are you okay with this? That's as a result of GDPR. It's trying to enforce a little more transparency. After GDPR came PSD2. PSD2 was primarily about payments and trying to make the payment industry, if you will, a little more transparent and certainly more competitive. And then came the UK with their initiative called Open Banking. So they started they may have been the ones to start this phrase. But anyway, their initiative is called Open Banking. And here again, the point here was they wanted to open up competition in the financial services arena. And how do you do that? First and foremost, this is all about sharing financial data. The thinking is sharing is a very good thing. Why? Because the more data we share, the more data ultimately gets fed into these big data lakes, and analytics gets fed into artificial intelligence and their algorithms and machine learning. And what comes out of this at the other end is, I was going to say more personalized, but I think I'd refine it and say highly personalized customer experiences. Better predictive experience for the customer, be it an end user or a small or medium-sized business. Now, part of this is that access to this data needs to be frictionless, transparent, complete, available, accurate, all those different terms, right? What we saw before on that previous slide was screen scraping. The fintechs are, taking web pages and looking for data in the web pages and loading databases. Web page changes, all of a sudden that data extraction program, that screen scraper breaks. That's not frictionless. Frictionless is being able to say, hey, I'm logging in. Here's an account number. Please give me transactions and balances in a way that I understand. That's sharing financial data frictionlessly, transparently. Now I'm going to say who I am when I'm trying to get that data, etc. This only works if we do this securely. And what does that mean? One, well, we've got to figure out a new methodology here. We can't be sharing credentials. Only the bank should have your credentials, no one else. That way they can be locked down. That way when you change them, you're only changing them in one place and you're changing them for everybody. So secure. The second part of secure is the data. When the data goes from between bank and fintech, fintech and fintech, bank and bank, it's got to be done so securely, meaning encrypted. Everything is encrypted. The conversation that banks have has to be encrypted. When the data is stored in a database, it should be encrypted. In fact, must be encrypted. You just can't leave yourself open to hacking in any way, shape, or form. So security is paramount here. Now, next step. The next step, and this is the new unique thing being brought to open banking, and that is consumers are being given consent controls. That is, when I am now going to log into bigbank.com, I am going to log in as Tim. I'm going to put in, my user ID and password, and then I am explicitly brought to a page that says, Tim, we understand that you want to share your data with mymoney.com. Is that correct? Yes, it's correct. Well, here are your accounts. Do you want to just check off which accounts you want to share with mymoney.com? And I just check off my checking and savings accounts. None of my kids' accounts, nothing else goes over, or maybe I'll add a credit card. Now I have control. And on top of that control, I'm explicitly giving consent. Well, with consent, I have the explicit ability to revoke that consent. I can now go to the bank and say, shut it down. No more sharing. And it's impossible at that point for mymoney.com to get my data. On top of this, and this is the more nuanced, evolving piece to the customer empowerment, this is the ability to choose what data to share. So, and I just gave an example of that. Evolutionary phase number one is here's a list of accounts. What accounts do you want to share? Phase two, and we've worked with some banks to do this, is scope. And scope is, hey, Tim, okay, here are your banks, here are your accounts. Now, let's talk about what you want to share within those accounts. Do you want to share your transactions? Do you want to share tax data? Do you want to share financial data? There's all sorts of questions, and the banks are maturing along this. And I think, this will probably go on for another couple of years as they evolve and think of different ways to slice and dice this, and different ways to let the customer stay in control. So that's open banking. Sharing data, sharing it securely, and giving consumers and small businesses and banks greater control. But let's talk about open finance now. Is the problem that we see here at EEI with calling it open banking is that you've probably ring-fenced and you're thinking smaller than it really is, i.e. you're thinking about banking, checking, savings, credit cards. Thinking, and when we see lots of presentations about open banking and stuff, it's all talking about end user consumer, so it has more of a retail feel to it. We talk open finance, and we'd like everybody to start thinking in terms of open finance. It's bigger than just retail banking. It's everything finance. So it's the 401ks, it's investments, it's your pension funds, it's everything finance. That's open finance. It's just the superset of everything about banking. Okay? That is open banking. Now, some of the opportunities that open finance provides. There's three major principles or areas that we see, which is personalization, innovation, and mitigation. Personalization we've already seen and talked about with things like 360-degree view of your assets and liabilities. But on top of that, you have feeding this AI machine with things like location data, right? So the mobile phone is awesome with, providing your location or even when you do a purchase. So I walk into Aeropostale and I buy myself a couple of shirts and some pants, use my credit card, and as I'm walking out of the store or I'm in the mall or whatever, I may get a notification from my credit card company. Hey, congrats on the pants and shirts. You're going to look super in them. I know you love sushi. There's a sushi place right around the corner, and take $3 off on us on your next order at sushi. That's location-based service. And that's decision making that and notifications that the bank can leverage based on your spending habits, or let's go back, based on analyzing your spending habits and knowing where you are based on location services. Innovation, think in terms of, let's talk about Netflix for a moment. Netflix put everybody up on their heads here when what they did was I can now watch a movie. We go watch Game of Thrones on and start to watch it on my phone. And oops, I gotta go. I shove my phone into my pocket. I'm busy, I'm working, I'm playing, I'm doing whatever. And 2 days later, I walk into my house, I sit down in the den and turn on the TV, and I can pick up that episode of Game of Thrones or that movie exactly where I left off. That's a great customer experience. And that we can apply in the financial industry in terms of, it's called omni-channel processing. Think of probably two of the more painful banking experiences: opening an account or applying for a mortgage or loan. Well, if we take this paradigm, this Netflix paradigm, and apply it to banking, I could start a mortgage application on my phone, go get busy, go into a meeting, come home, go to my desktop, log into the bank website, and be right exactly where I was before to continue the application. On top of that, and there's some regulatory and legal issues here, but on top of that, the banks can do a better job of pre-filling some of that information into your application so that it makes it easier to complete the application. So, and mitigation, we talked about this, comes in the form of coming up with new technologies and methodologies so that I don't have to do such things as share my login credentials with other institutions. So we come up with things, they're called tokens, tokenization, to obfuscate who the user is, at least uh, during connection. But the token will ensure that mymoney.com gets Tim's 2 accounts that he signed up for. So those are the major principles and areas that we see where what the banks can do and the fintechs can do is it's personalize, innovate, and mitigate. And let's now talk about what some of these banks are doing today. And all of them, as you'll see in these examples, take a little piece out of each of those three principles. It's personalize, it's innovate, and it's mitigate. But before we do that, here's what's happened in the internet. And this is the marvelous thing about what's happened. If you think about Amazon, Uber, and Netflix, there's no new product. Not at all. They have no new product, no new service. What they've done, though, is they've redefined the customer experience and they've made it completely personalized. Amazon's awesome. I will tell you, I do have an American Express card, and when I've been on Amazon and I'm about to pay with American Express. So tell, hey, Tim, guess what? You've got X number of points. Use your points. Till the thing's a freebie. Well, I mean, it's just an awesome customer experience, right? And this is what they've done. And in so doing, they're forcing everybody else to now pick up and get moving on redefining their processes, redefining their interactions with their consumers in a more personalized way. Amazon, as we well know, has made shopping fun. And, they've taken over the world in that response, in that regard. And now the banks are responding, okay, as well as lots of other industries. So this is a little cheat sheet, these are the areas that the banks are dipping their feet into. Um, and so let's start with USAA. They've got they've upgraded their mobile app with a contact us button. And basically what happens is if I'm in the middle of the USA's mobile app and I hit contact us, I'm immediately connected to a customer service rep who has all of my information up on a screen or two. They can see my accounts, they can see my balances, they can see my transactions, and they know for context exactly where I was in the mobile app when I hit contact us. So they now have an idea of what I may be asking about. And so that whole process of me calling a bank and sitting on hold for 10 minutes listening to awful music is gotten rid of. I'm immediately talking to somebody who has a sense of what I may be interested in or be trying to work through. Awesome. Capital One is working with Foursquare on a location push. And this is exactly what I was talking about before with me walking out of Aeropostale with shirts and pants and Foursquare and Capital One congratulating me on my purchase. And here comes that sushi bar. Westpac New Zealand has wireless centers in their branches. They can pick up who the clients are, and all of a sudden on the teller screens, I know exactly who my client is and who I'm talking to. Lloyd's is coming up with a new mobile app that allows you to set up payments without authorization. And what this, they already know who you are. So, once you've authorized or using the app, um, the payments is easy. And Bank of America has created Erica, their chatbot space. And, the chatbot helps customers with the basic banking needs as well as they're looking into some robo-advising, et cetera. So if you think about it, each one of these 5 examples has a little bit or a lot of it of personalization about it. It certainly has innovation on it, and in a couple of places, we're looking at mitigation, right? If USAA, I'm mitigating that whole process. I'm no longer listening to that awful music. So this is where banks are doing it, and for the most part, a lot of these banks are um, dipping their toes in. Some of them, and we've worked with a number of them are going in whole hog and working on some major or doing some major API work so that they can now move on to phase 2. And that brings us to, and we've come to the end of this podcast. This is my teaser slide for the next go round. We'll be talking about APIs, what they are, how they work, and what people are doing with them. As you can see on this slide, we've given you a couple of examples, but stay tuned for the next podcast. Let's now recap where we've been. So, quick recap. Why were we talking about open finance? Because screen scraping is a common problematic practice. We've got issues with security. We have issues with privacy. We have issues with cost, all sorts of issues with screen scraping. And yet we want those experiences to continue and become more personalized and mean more for us. So what is open banking? We talked about this. It's securely sharing financial data. It's empowering users with controls over that data. And as we keep pushing, it's everything finance. Lastly, we went through where are the market opportunities, and we posited that there's three major areas for the opportunities, and those are personalization, innovation, mitigation. And then we provided a couple of examples with the large banks and what they're doing. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. And I hope we meet again the next time around and podcast episode 2. Enjoy, have a great day, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.